Welcome. This is Trinity Place in Geneva, New York, and my name is Cameron Miller, and this is a sermon for the last Sunday of Epiphany. It includes two readings, one from Exodus and Matthew, which you can read if you're watching this as part of our worship video. But it's the Exodus story of Moses going up to the mountain to receive the tablets of the law, and the story of Jesus going up to the mountain to experience the transfiguration. So I should also warn you that this is an unfinished sermon, sort of. It'll make sense. You'll get it. Anyway, Wednesday, this past Wednesday, which is, when I'm lucky, my sermon day, Rabia, which is my dog, and I began our morning with our usual walk to the lake. Walk is a euphemism because I begrudgingly walk and limp and wobble while she trots and sniffs and wags. I sigh and harumph and shuffle, waiting for her to decide exactly the right spot to do the one and then the other of the things we've gone out there to do. The one thing we do together is sit on our bench and look out at the lake, sit in the presence of the water. Me, because I am essentially a sedentary contemplator, and she because I rub her belly. Anyway, that's a long introduction for what was a very quick, brief experience I want to tell you about. Now, the sun was brilliant. This was early in the morning, middle February, when it's mostly been, almost exclusively been gray for weeks. But this particular morning, the sun was just brilliant. It was already a giant ball in the sky early in the morning, hovering what seemed like just a building's height above the water. It was intensely reflected then in a ribbon of gold that unfolded upon the white-shouldered waves, pushed to the north end of the lake by a stiff south wind from Watkins Glen. Sometimes when we're sitting there, I pray. Sometimes I talk Tevye-like to the creator of all that is, and I let God know what I think should be done as if divinity was a power at my command. Other times, most of the time, I sit and invite the wind and the waves and the sun and the clouds and even the rain and the snow to speak to me in whatever words I need to hear. But last Wednesday, as I raised my head toward the rising sun, I couldn't look up. I could not look up. I was about to say something likely very unimportant, and I don't remember it, when the intensity of the light refused me. Mind you, I was wearing sunglasses, and still I could not raise my head from its Rabia level height to speak toward the sun. I had already decided intuitively, which is the way I make most decisions, to use the sun as a kind of surrogate for God. I was going to look toward the sun and offer my prayers. But the sun had another idea. Down, you fool, the sun might as well have grumbled. I could not look up. The sun was too much, too brilliant, too radiant, too intense for me to look at it, even with sunglasses on. And that, of course, was perfect. We come before God as if a manageable deity, a genie in a bottle we keep a cork on. Like in many traditional churches, there's that tabernacle with the candle lit behind red glass so we know that Jesus is there. Be careful. We have the altar where God plays peek-and-boo with us. We have the Bible in which God sends messages in a bottle. We have preachers who tell us what God thinks and what God wants and what God would have us to do. In short, We have a very domesticated God served up in bite-sized pieces so we can chew and swallow our religion safely. But in fact, there is no God like that, not even close. There is the creator of all that is, the creator of all that is, so eternal, so timeless, so cosmic that God eats black holes one at a time for a snack. Let's just get a little perspective here. In the Milky Way, where our smallish little galaxy of sun and planets forms a little tail end, there are 50 other galaxies. In the Milky Way, the small galaxy, the Milky Way, there are 50 other galaxies. In the largest galaxy in the Milky Way, the largest galaxy in the Milky Way is 14,000 light years in diameter. 14,000 light years in diameter. Just that one big galaxy, the biggest one in the Milky Way, just that one big galaxy has 10 billion stars in it. 10 billion stars! But back up a little bit further to embrace the universe, our universe, which is only one of many universes. Our universe has between 100 and 200 billion galaxies in it. Our universe has between 100 and 200 billion galaxies in it. Just our little universe, which we laughingly used to think was the only universe, has as many as 200 billion galaxies. God, our little God, is the creator of all those billions and billions of galaxies, each with 10 billion suns or more. God, our little God, is that God. That one. And we somehow have gotten the idea that we can reduce that God to a manageable size so that we can know it and understand it and follow its every command and digest it like some cookie that delights us. Ha! When Moses came out of the cloud, which was probably the small Sagittarius star cloud known as Messier 24. I'm just kidding. When Moses came out of his cloud, Exodus reports that he shined, that his face shined. Moses' face shined so brightly that for the rest of his life he had to wear a veil over his head. That's shinier than this. Moses on the mountain and Jesus on the mountain are cartoon stories that attempt to tell us the impossible. Like cartoons and comics, they tell fantastical tales to point to ordinary truths. And the ordinary truth is that God is that God. And we are nothing but eternal stardust gathered in a temporary body. We can't even get closer to our own sun than 3 million miles without burning up. How close could we get to that God without being obliterated? Let us remember that the Bible was not a baby born all at once in a single dump. It's composed of stories told before they were written. Stories told by storytellers in circles of hushed voices and passed down for years and decades and even centuries before they ever got written and edited. These two mountaintop stories that we read this morning are shadows of the stories that were told to deliver a sense of the breadth and the depth and the power of a God they knew better than we know is that God. We think that because we know about cells and atoms and subatomic particles, and that we can split them in order to harness bombs, that we're big and important. We think that because we know how to capture the power of the sun and the wind and fire, then we're big and full of wisdom. We think that because we can fly and dive and sail, because we can vaccinate and paint and build, that we're big and powerful. Well, we are so mistaken. We are small. We are infinitesimal. We are vulnerable and fragile in the presence of the universe, let alone the God of all the universes. These ancient stories seek to remind us that the humility we lost in the midst of modernity is a lens that we can find and put back on so that we can see clearly. There are, of course, a number of other intended punchlines in these stories, ones that get stretched out into laws and doctrines and dogma. But for me, the early morning sun reminded me that the Transfiguration is about that God. And we need to stop sometimes and to step back and to reach for the humility lens. Well, the rest of the sermon is for you to finish. I hope you do. Peace be with you.